Most people think Beauty and the Beast is a tale of unlikely romance. The disturbing truth is different. The original story from 1740 described a beast with tusks, scales, and a trunk, so monstrous that Beauty was physically sickened by him. Written in the aristocratic salons of Paris by Gabrielle Suzanne de Villeneuve, this was not a children's story, but a coded critique of women's lack of agency, laced with body horror and razor-sharp satire. What did Villeneuve really intend, and why was this nightmare recast as a fairy tale about love? The answers are woven into the story's grotesque first pages. In 1740, Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve described the beast not as a misunderstood prince in disguise, but as something far more unsettling. The earliest version is reptilian, composite, and deliberately disturbing. The beast had a very wide mouth, and a nose you could easily fit your fist into, eyes burning with a horrible fire, a red beard, fur the color of flames, a long tail, cloven hooves, and dreadful claws at the tips. Around its neck was something like a trunk, similar to an elephant's, its hind legs like those of a lizard, its body covered in scales like a salamander's, and the head of a mastiff. Translators Louis Seifert, James Robinson Planchet, and Jack Zipes preserved these details, confirming that Villeneuve's beast is a patchwork of animal nightmares. Mastiff jaws, an elephant-like trunk, lizard legs, a scaled salamander hide, cloven hooves, and brutal claws. No velvet ears, no gentle eyes, only composite horror. Beauty's first meeting with the creature is not curiosity, but revulsion. Her reaction is physical. She recoils, becomes nauseated, and the narrative lingers on her dread. This is not a fairy tale meant to comfort. It is a warning, written in the language of monsters. Content warning. The following passages contain graphic descriptions of body horror as originally published in 1740. In the 18th century in France, a new kind of storytelling took shape behind closed doors. Aristocratic salons, private gatherings led by educated women, became laboratories for fairy tales that were anything but innocent. Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve moved in this world, surrounded by writers such as Madame d'Aulnoy, who had set a precedent with tales of monstrous suitors and rebellious heroines. These stories circulated among women who read the coded language of critique. For them, marriage was not a romantic adventure. It was a transaction, often arranged for profit or alliance, and rarely for love. Villeneuve's circle treated fairy tales as a safe space to question the rules they lived under. The grotesque details in her version of Beauty and the Beast, so unsettling by modern standards, were not simply meant to shock. Scholar Marina Warner and others argue that the absurdity of loving a monster was a deliberate exaggeration, a satirical jab at the expectation that young women should accept any fate handed to them, no matter how horrifying. Within the salons, these tales could be read as warnings, parodies, or subtle acts of rebellion. The monstrous husband, transformed only through female obedience, mirrored the real demands placed on noble daughters. Underneath the surface, Villeneuve's story is more than a fairy tale. It is a coded message, shaped by women who had little power in public, yet wielded sharp wit in private. The horror, the satire, and the social critique were woven together and hidden in plain sight. In the world Villeneuve wrote for, marriage was not a matter of affection, but of calculation. French noble families arranged unions for daughters as young as 12, often to men twice their age. Contracts spelled out the exchange, a dowry of 100,000 livres or more, a girl's future handed over in return for property and alliance. Under the Coutume de Paris, daughters were transferred like assets, fathers negotiated, notaries recorded, and the bride's consent was rarely a concern. Against this backdrop, the theft of a single rose carries a weight that goes beyond sentiment. In 18th century France, a rose was more than a flower. It was a symbol of virginity and sexual purity that belonged first to a father and then to a husband. When Beauty's father plucks the forbidden bloom, He triggers a debt that can only be paid with his daughter's body. The story's logic is transactional, a minor trespass by the patriarch settled by the ultimate sacrifice from a daughter. Contemporary readers would have understood the rose as a coded reference to the transfer of sexual ownership. The tale's opening is not a romantic gesture, but a negotiation of property. Beauty's fate is sealed not by love, but by the legal and economic machinery of her time. The monster at the gate is just the next step in a chain of deals, and the rose is the price of her obedience. Envy runs deep in Villeneuve's original tale. Beauty's 6 elder sisters, once accustomed to luxury, simmer with resentment after their families fall from grace. Their youngest sibling, marked by a quiet resilience, becomes the target of their bitterness. When Beauty is permitted a brief visit home from the Beast's palace, the sisters seize their chance. They press her to stay longer than promised, knowing that the Beast's survival depends on her timely return. Their hope is blunt. They believe Beauty's absence will drive the Beast to despair and death, trapping her forever in guilt or grief. This is not the petty jealousy of later retellings, but a calculated act, one that edges toward fratricide by proxy. Beneath this domestic treachery, the story reveals layers of supernatural intrigue. The world Beauty inhabits is shaped by fairy courts, locked in silent conflict. Her sister's malice is only one thread in a tapestry of hidden power struggles. Beauty herself is more than a merchant's daughter. She is the child of a fairy mother, her true lineage concealed to shield her from the ambitions of rival immortals. The Beast's monstrous form results from a curse, cast by a spurned fairy, punishment for refusing an unwanted marriage. Fairy alliances, betrayals, and inheritance disputes ripple beneath the human drama, turning Beauty into a pawn in a game played by beings older and more ruthless than her sisters. Later versions would erase these complexities, but in Villeneuve's text, every act of jealousy and every broken promise echoes with the threat of both mortal and magical ruin. Long before Villeneuve's tale echoed through French salons, the pattern of a woman bound to a monstrous husband was already ancient. Around 150 AD, the Roman writer Apuleius recorded the story of Cupid and Psyche in the Golden Ass. In that myth, Psyche is married to a mysterious creature she never sees by daylight. Her jealous sisters, convinced she is sleeping with a monster, urge her to break the rules and reveal his true form. When she does, Cupid is exposed, not a beast, but a god in disguise. The story's structure is almost identical: a hidden groom, a forbidden revelation, sisters who sow doubt, and a final transformation. This motif repeats across continents and centuries. Folklorists trace it under the label ATU425C, the animal bridegroom type. In some variants, the husband is a serpent or a bear, and the bride must endure his inhuman form without hope of change. Italian tales like El Re Serpente and Scandinavian stories such as East of the Sun and West of the Moon feature brides who marry actual animals, sometimes never seeing them as men. The union is often permanent, no spell, no redemption, just acceptance of the taboo. These tales linger at the edge of bestiality, forcing their heroines to rationalize the impossible. Later versions would soften these endings, but the shadow of the original remains, unsettling and unresolved. Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont's 1756 abridgment stripped away Villeneuve's tangled fairy politics and body horror, recasting Beauty and the Beast as a lesson for children. In Beaumont's hands, the Beast's monstrous anatomy vanishes, replaced by vague menace and moral clarity. The sisters' murder plot becomes simple jealousy. The story's focus narrows, Beauty's virtue and obedience are tested, and the Beast's redemption hinges not on love, but on her willingness to submit. This sanitized version became the blueprint for generations, from Andrew Lang's 1889 retelling to Disney's 1991 animated film, where the Beast's animal traits soften into a misunderstood prince. Scholars remain divided. Jack Zipes argues that Beaumont's cuts turned the tale into a tool for socializing girls, rewarding obedience and self-sacrifice above all. Marina Warner, by contrast, reads satire in the original, a coded critique of marriage as a monstrous trial now lost in translation. Gender studies experts point to an enduring media trope, transformation through female patience rather than genuine consent. Today, The consequences echo far beyond fairy tales. UNICEF estimates 12 million girls are married before 18 each year, many still taught that duty outweighs desire. The story's evolution is not only literary, but deeply political, a mirror for the stakes of obedience and the cost of sanitizing discomfort. Fairy tales still teach us what to fear, what to accept, and what to desire. Even now, stories shape our beliefs about love, power, and obedience, whether we realize it or not. The monsters may change, but the lessons linger. Which ones are we still letting in? Share your thoughts below.